Okay, and we're live. Welcome back to the show. I'm joined by Deathwatch again. We are going to be discussing Kyle Kulinski again. And once again, he has some very abhorrent opinions on the death penalty. So, a few days ago, the state of Missouri executed a convicted murderer named Ernest Johnson. And the anti-death penalty crowd had an absolute fit over it. And so, Deathwatch, you can introduce yourself. I think people who watch the show, know who you are. But if you want, you can introduction.
Yeah, I'm Deathwatch. I'm back here again with, I think this is the fourth stream we've done on the death penalty. Now, Ernest Johnson's crime is emblematic of why we have the death penalty and why we should continue to have the death penalty. So Johnson was convicted of the 1994 murders of Mary Bratcher, Fred Jones, and Scruggs in Columbia, Missouri. They were working at a store, and then Ernest Johnson in with a hammer and began hitting all three of the victims multiple times. They suffered combined over a dozen injuries. One of the victims was in the face, but that wasn't fatal. So he beat that victim, hammer. He stabbed one other victim with a screwdriver at least 10 times and then bludgeoned her to death. He did this all because he wanted to get money to buy drugs. And he robbed over $400 from the cash register. Fortunately, not even 24 hours later, he was arrested and he was put on death. That's basically his crime in a nutshell.
So you kind of got cut off at the end. He got put on death. You said he got put on death row. And so the murders occurred in 94. So he was on death row for 27 years, 20 years,
26 years.
Yeah, 26 years. Okay. All right. And yeah, and he claimed to be mentally disabled. And I think he probably was to some extent, but there's a lot of context.
He definitely had some mental issues. I don't think anyone's disputing that. Was he intellectually disabled? I don't think so. And if he wasn't, then it was just barely, like at the very minimum level above intellectually disabled. Not that, in my opinion, that made him any less deserving of the death penalty. He deserved it just the same.
Yeah. And yeah, so a lot of people had threw a lot of the anti-death penalty crowd threw a lot of tantrums that day, and one of them is Kyle Kulinski, and he graced us with this atrocious video, which I will now share. Let me see if I can find it. There we go. Hold on. There's something wrong with this.
Yeah, the volume is not very high. Like, I can hear it, but it's not like loud enough.
Yeah, hold on. I think it's an issue with my here. Oh, video file. Never mind. I was sharing it the wrong way.
Got this news yesterday, and this is truly, truly heartbreaking. A Missouri man has been executed for murder despite pleas for clemency by advocates who say he had an intellectual disability. Ernest Johnson received a lethal injection on Tuesday after the U.S. Supreme Court refused to consider a stay of execution earlier in the day. The 61-year-old's pleas for leniency had received support from Pope Francis and 2 members of Congress. Johnson killed 3 convenience store workers in a 1994 robbery. Attorneys for Johnson argued he was ineligible for the death penalty because multiple IQ tests have shown he has the mental capacity of a child and still reads at a third grade level.
Did you pause it?
Yeah, I did. I'm sorry, I
Okay.
didn't notice my mic was muted. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm pretty confident when I say this. Most children know that bludgeoning 3 people to death is wrong and should be punished very severely.
Yeah. And, Kyle can obviously relate to Ernest Johnson because he also has the mental capacity of a child and also probably reads at a third grade level.
Honestly,
Anyway.
honestly, Ernest Johnson was probably the smartest of all the people advocating for his life because he had absolute fucking nuts like Corey Bush, Ayanna Presley, who were crying and shitting themselves over this murderous scum getting a punishment rightfully earned by his crime.
Yeah. So he's gonna go on, and well, let's listen to the rest of this.
Johnson, a black man, was born with fetal alcohol syndrome after his mother drank heavily during her pregnancy. So, yeah, again, that's heartbreaking. Let me show you. This was his last words, official final statement. DOC has made available a last statement from Ernest Johnson dated yesterday. I am sorry spelled incorrectly, and have remorse for what I do. I want to say that I love my family and friends. I am thankful of all that my lawyer spelled incorrectly, has done for me.
Now, I want to highlight something here. These are Ernest Johnson's own words. He is at the beginning admitting that he knows why he's on death row. He knows why he's being executed. And he even says, like, I had remorse for what I did.
And he says, if I am executed, I know where I'm going. Yeah. So, although personally I'm not religious at all, this indicates that Ernest Johnson knows what he believes is going to happen after he is executed.
Yeah, but I want to, for anyone who's watching this, I want
just
them to
keep
this
that in mind.
Yeah, he knows why he's being executed. He said so himself. And keep that in mind when you listen to the excuses that Kyle makes later in this video.
They made me feel love as if I was family to them. I love them all. For all the people that has prayed for me, I thank them from the bottom of my, I think that's supposed to say heart, but it doesn't. I love the Lord with all my heart and soul. If I'm executed, I know, no spelled incorrectly, where I am going to heaven, because I ask him to forgive me, God, everyone. And with respect, with spelled incorrectly, Ernest L. Johnson. So there was a Supreme Court case in 2002. And in that case, they said it violates the Eighth Amendment protection from cruel and unusual punishment to execute people who have intellectual problems.
It's actually not quite that simple, Kyle. Anyway, I'm not all that familiar with that decision, but I think it didn't set a standard what is considered intellectual disability. Like, it didn't.
There is no IQ cutoff.
Yeah. So just because he had a low, and also it also said that an intellectual disability cannot in and of itself exclude someone from execution or something to that effect. Was it mental illness? Someone having a mental illness.
Yeah. No. Well, mental illness and intellectual disability, which in that court case was this is where the term mentally retarded became not really politically correct, but they used mentally retarded. So, according to the Supreme their standard for what constitutes as mentally retarded, if the IQ score does not really fluctuate off very low from a young age. Because having a low IQ when you're on death row does not necessarily mean you're intellectually disabled. Because what inmates will do is they will deliberately fail tests so that they can argue that their IQ is low and therefore they're ineligible for execution. So Ernest Johnson had been given several IQ tests over the years. Beginning when he was 8, he scored a 71. At the age of 12, he scored a 55.8. He scored 72.9 at age 35, so 2 years after the murders that he committed. He scored 64.6 at age 43. He scored 64.3 at 44. He scored 66.1 at 48. He scored 66.8 at 49. And he scored 66.4 at 59. So this guy's IQ was not really consistent.
Yeah. Does Missouri have like an IQ cutoff when it comes to intellectual disability?
No, as far as I know, I'll have to double check this later, but I don't think that it's constitutional to have a blanket IQ cutoff.
Okay, because I thought there were some states that do.
The commonly accepted definition of intellectually disabled is an IQ of less than 70. So Ernest Johnson's IQ at around the time of the crime was above 70.
Yeah.
So whatever his IQ scores after that, which dropped a lot, could suggest that he was faking his IQ scores to get appellate relief. I don't know that for a fact, but that could be an explanation for that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think he was particularly an intelligent inmate. I just, but I also think that I think that as long as you can appreciate the criminality of your actions at the time you're committing them, I don't care if you're like paraplegic, or in a brain dead or in a coma by the time you're getting executed. You're being executed for a crime you consciously committed. And Ernest Johnson he, as you saw in his last statement, he obviously knew what he was doing, and he obviously knew it was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have very low IQ, if you have, I don't know if it would go as far as to say if you're on the spectrum autism wise, or if you have,
oh my God,
to be
fully
autistic.
Autism and intellectual disability are two completely different things. Autism isn't necessarily correlated with IQ.
Yeah, and as someone who is on the spectrum, like I am, I find that utterly insulting. Like, I don't know. Basically, as long as I've been alive, I've known it's bad to beat people to death with a hammer. That should not be controversial. And actually, people on the spectrum also tend to be on the higher end of the IQ bell curve. So what Kyle is just, I honestly, I am kind of at a loss for words. It's really insulting to insinuate that,
the score, the IQ score for intellectual disability is commonly accepted at being below 70. The IQ score for people that are on the autism spectrum really it fluctuates, because you have people on the spectrum who are very low IQs, you have people on the spectrum who have very high IQs, and then you have around average level IQs. It's not in any way, shape, or form like being disabled. They're two completely different things.
Yeah, I just, that one utterly insulting thing to say too. I mean, to insinuate that people on the spectrum are more likely to commit murder or not smart enough to understand the criminality of their actions. You know, I don't know. I find it insulting.
Or if maybe somebody with Down syndrome or something like that,
Oh my God.
They're not allowed to put you to death if you committed a crime and you don't really fully understand the consequences of your actions.
Okay, hold up.
Yep.
Okay. Number one, Ernest Johnson, his own words, knew why he was being executed.
Precisely.
Number two, people who have Downs, their IQ scores consistently remain low. You don't just go in and out of having Downs. As someone who's literally grown up with people with that, the level at which their people with Downs are able to function, it might improve, but it's always going to be consistently below the average person who doesn't have Downs. So they're not at all really the same or comparable.
Yeah, and also Ernst he said Kyle I guess is insinuating that Ernst Johnson didn't understand the consequences of his actions. This is why I said, like, keep in mind his last words. He wrote those.
Also,
he didn't have someone ready
during the crime. He had two sets of clothing, one that he would wear while he would commit the murders, and then another set of clothes after, so that he could be able to potentially avoid being identified by certain. He had actually planned the robbery murders at least a month in advance. He had tried to get rid of evidence. He had tried to cover his.
So
it wasn't
that
like
shows immense premeditation.
It wasn't like he impulsively decided to go rob the store of 3 people. This wasn't something that he did out of the blue.
No, this was premeditated to quite an extensive degree.
And it's based on the theory that you don't really know what you're doing. So there's an element of choice that is granted to people who have full mental capacity. They look at you like you could have not committed the murder or whatever.
Yes, Kyle, precisely. He could not.
He's having some stuff out of him somewhat. I mean, what? I said Kyle is looking at, apparently he's having some self-awareness that, Ernest Johnson had literally every choice in the world to not make the choice where he would. There's one, well, I mean, there's several, generally one law that is universally the most important one, and that law is do not commit murder. Ernest Johnson not only did that very thing he was not supposed to do, but he did it 3 times over. No one made him and slam it on 3 people's skulls until they stopped moving. He chose to do that on his own, and no one forced him to do it. This wasn't something that he had an idea that was given by someone else. He chose to do this.
Yeah, and not only that, the insinuation that he had of course he had the choice not to commit it. If there are lots of people there are lots of intellectually disabled people, more so than Ernst Johnson, who have never committed murders. I know some people who have mental illness. They're some of the most harmless people you'll ever meet. So they're
more likely to be victims of that, of that than actually be the people responsible for that. So, as pretty much always knows jack shit about what he's talking about, but I think anyone with brain that.
Yeah, Kyle's making shit up as usual.
But the more somebody struggles mentally, whether it's IQ-wise or mental illness or whatever it is, at some point, everybody agrees, well, that makes no sense. So, for example, if somebody is a paranoid schizophrenic and they are literally hallucinating and they're just not connected to reality at all, and they think that somebody who's trying to help them is a demon and they're fighting off the demon and they stab the demon to death or something like that, well, we all realize that's a tragedy and that's a crime and that's terrible and some action has to be taken, but should that person be put to death? Well, if they really didn't know what they're doing, they don't have agency.
Okay.
Except Ernst Johnson did. He wasn't hallucinating. He killed them to get money to buy drugs.
See, here's one of the things I've noticed about Kyle, and I don't watch him because I like to not be.
You value your brain very much.
I like having several brain cells.
Yeah.
But what I've noticed is that Kyle likes to just muddy the waters and bring up irrelevant examples to try to make it seem like what we're talking about in particular isn't really the case. Ernest Johnson was not, as far as I know, on drugs, and even if he was, the scope of his actions indicates that he had agency. So, and once again, Kyle likes to reiterate that Ernest Johnson doesn't know why he was executed. His last statement clearly proves otherwise, and
it's funny how the antis are trying to dance around that. Even he knew why he was being executed, and so he wrote it out himself. It wasn't even like his attorney said, "Oh, he knows why." It's like, no, this is like primary. This is like a primary source, and so that kind of puts them in a bind.
Mm-hmm.
So to say kill him, you would have to say the system is acting just as barbaric, if not much more barbaric, in reaction to the crime.
Oh, yes. Lethal injection is exactly the same as bashing somebody's skull in with a claw hammer. What an absolute piece of shit thing to say. I mean, really.
Yeah.
That's, yeah. I value my brain cells too much. I'll let this cringe fest continue.
See, that's the fundamental contradiction of the death penalty is like, we're going to prove murdering is wrong by murdering you.
For fuck's sake.
For the love of God.
First of all, I love that Kyle's face right now is exactly what I think every time I fucking hear this argument.
Yeah, he's like, bro, what? Yeah.
Okay.
The death penalty isn't murder. I could go on for hours about that.
The death penalty, and I'm going to say this once, the death penalty is murder in the same way that incarceration is kidnapping, taxations are theft. They're not. And I think anyone who tries to argue that really has no right to lecture anyone on morality. You can be against the penalty, fine. I think that's a bad idea to be blanketly against the death penalty.
Yeah.
But I think you should be able to recognize that there's that the majority of people can tell the difference between bludgeoning 3 people to death for $400 in drugs versus being executed for that crime.
Yeah, I think that's what, at its core, the anti-death penalty movement, and specifically people like Kyle, are trying to blur the line between guilty and innocent, and between justice and injustice. They're trying to create this awful moral equivalency between murder and justice system. Ernst Johnson got 27 years of due process and that was due process his victims did not get. He was allowed appeals. He was allowed to have representation throughout this process. There is no comparison between the death penalty and murder. And
exactly.
One of the most despicable false equivalencies I've ever heard in my life.
What? That's classic, like, do as I say, not as I do stuff. Which is
No, Kyle, it's called consequences. It's called if you take human life, it means that you don't deserve your own right to life. That's a system of consequences.
The hallmark of bad dads.
Whoa. I was going to say, when I first started becoming very familiar with the death penalty, I used to be borderline against it, but then I began reading what these people like Ernest, what they did to earn their place on death row. At first I was like, oh, death penalty opponents aren't really against consequences. They just want to lessen them. People like Kyle keep convincing me more and more and more that they're against consequences, period.
Yeah.
It's become less of a straw man to say that, because you start seeing how they say that society at large is responsible for creating murderers, when in reality themselves, because they have agency, or they like to blame things that have absolutely no connection to
Yeah, like
people's
like
decisions to
capitalism.
murder. Yeah, or race.
I have some friends who claim capitalism is the reason people have to commit murder. It's like, yeah,
I
I
think I
doubt
think
Lawrence
think
Whitaker kidnapped and raped those teenage girls and told them, it's like, sorry, the bourgeoisie forced me to do this because
I
we
think
live
I
in a
think
capitalist society.
I think Andrei Chikatilo in the Soviet Union would like to have a word with them. Fortunately, he can't, because he's dead, because he was executed.
Yeah, and just in time too, because only a couple of years later, Russia stopped conducting
Imposed a
executions.
moratorium.
Yeah.
I think the fact that the Supreme Court didn't intervene here is almost overturns that 2002 Supreme Court ruling.
God, I wish. That was a
Okay.
bad decision.
Also, in Atkins versus Virginia, the Supreme Court established, I think, a set of protocols for how to meet the burden that Atkins did in his case. Ernest Johnson did not meet that burden, to prove that he was intellectually disabled. He didn't meet that burden. He failed so badly. Even Stephen Breyer, not even Elena Kagan, not even Sonia Sotomayor dissented from the court's decision to deny the state. It was unanimous, by the way. So he failed so bad that even the three have agreed with him. We're just like, no, come on, you didn't meet that.
Yeah, and Breyer is an open anti. Like, he is openly said he's against the death penalty. Even he couldn't find a reason to stay this execution. And I also love how they were trying to blame Biden for not intervening. Biden, the president doesn't have jurisdiction over state cases on death row. So,
and if
unfortunately,
if had somehow found a way to stop states from carrying, attorneys general from states like Oklahoma, Alabama, Florida, and Missouri would sue the ever-loving shit out of the Biden administration as basically states' rights, and they would win.
Yeah.
Now, their counter-argument as well, there was planning that was involved in his killing of the three convenience store workers during the robbery. I don't know. That strikes me as kind of up in the air, because it could have been planned to do the...
Are you kidding me, Kyle? Yeah, look, he planned it out, but do we really know what he knew he was doing? Yeah. What the fuck is this? I mean, like...
I was actually glad that the video was only 9 minutes long, because I was like, at least it's not like 20 minutes like the previous one that we reacted to. But I feel like Kyle's just compressing like the amount of bullshit like into those 9 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, I think the Gray Zone stream we did was, I think that was the most painful I had to sit through. But this one was, I mean, like, he just... Hold on, I want to go back. I want to listen to that again.
Which is the hallmark of bad dads. I think the fact that the Supreme Court didn't intervene here is almost overturns that 2002 Supreme Court ruling. Now, their counter-argument as well, there was planning that was involved in his killing of the three convenience store workers during the robbery. I don't know. That strikes me as kind of up in the air, because it could...
How is that up in the air? How? There was planning. Obviously, that means he knew what he was doing. Like, really, like, I can't even... I don't even know how to respond to this. Well, let's keep going. I hope you have a good set of liver transplants waiting, because we're only about halfway through this video.
Could have been planned to do the robbery, of course, but if a robbery goes wrong, then, you know, maybe he didn't have the intent to do it, but he did it.
Okay. Stop. I see this every fucking time these type of cases come up. There's a thing called felony murder, and it's exactly what it sounds like. If you kill someone while you're committing a felony, in which in this case was a robbery, you are just as guilty as if you had planned to commit these murders. I think that the evidence that Ernest Johnson brought a hammer with him and a gun indicates that he definitely anticipated potential for people dying. But even if he didn't, that's still irrelevant because he's committing a felony. It still
but also,
doesn't make it.
Yeah, but also, what did they think he was going to do with the gun? Juggle it? I mean, use it to blow bubbles? Or, there's only one reason you bring a weapon with you when you're going to commit a robbery, is because you anticipate that you're going to have to use it. And so, of course he was fully intending to kill them when he committed that robbery, and he did.
And even if he didn't, it would still be irrelevant.
Yeah.
Because he was committing a felony, and 3 people died because he was committing that felony.
Yeah.
I'm obviously not saying it's a good thing. I'm obviously not saying there shouldn't be consequences. But
in a way, you are, Kyle. You are saying that the consequences for murder should not be what they are, because you want to lessen the consequences for murder and thereby belittle the value of human life. This is one of the principal reasons one of the reasons I support the death penalty is because it imposes the ultimate punishment for the ultimate crime. Taking the life of somebody else deprives them of their most fundamental liberty. And if you do that, you have clearly shown no respect for that right, and therefore you don't deserve to keep it. And but that's why I support the death penalty, because it places the ultimate price tag on human life.
The idea of the death penalty, I mean, if you're saying even somebody with the intellectual capacity of a grade schooler can be put to death for this, then you're saying there are no limits. So why not execute the paranoid schizophrenic person?
Because there's a difference between killing somebody when you can't appreciate the criminality of your actions and killing somebody while you're consciously engaged in a felony. Kyle doesn't understand
anything.
Yeah.
Anything in general, but the death penalty in particular.
Yeah. Ernest Johnson said himself he knew what he was doing was wrong. So
keep in mind, one thing that surprisingly, I don't know if Kyle mentions it later, but death penalty opponents were basically saying that Ernest Johnson lost 20% of his brain while he was on death row. The reason for that was because there was a benign found in his brain, and they had to do brain surgery, and that cost him 20% of his brain, which I'm sure the death penalty opponents were jealous of, because more brain than they could ever have. But keep in mind, he was executed after this brain surgery. So I would assume that his IQ dropped notice after the brain surgery. The fact that he still understood he was being executed indicates to me that he definitely had, at least degree, the ability to understand why he had put himself in this predicament to begin with.
Yeah. It's also important to note that surgery took place 14 years after he was sentenced to death. So he had all of his brain when he committed that murder. Well, those 3 murders.
Yeah.
So they can't use that as an excuse they didn't know what he was doing. It happened after he did what he did. And even then, he still knew what he did and why it was wrong.
Why not go further than that and execute people for much lower level crimes?
Oh, Kyle, you don't know anything. Really. We only have the death penalty for murder. And it should stay
And
that
well,
way.
specifically capital murder.
Yeah,
Because
capital
not all
murder.
murders are inherently eligible for the death penalty.
Yeah.
But,
Death
and
row inmates
specifically,
make up.
we cannot execute someone for murder crime at the state level because Kennedy versus said that. So we
Yeah.
can't even do that even if we wanted to.
Yeah. Kenny versus Louisiana, that overturned the final non-homicide death penalty statute. There was in Louisiana retained the death penalty for child rape, even if it didn't result in death. And Kenny versus Louisiana ruled that unconstitutional. So now the death penalty can only be applied for cases that result in death, and specific murder in particular, first-degree murder. And Kyle is again moving the goalpost. Ernest Johnson was not executed because he was mentally disabled. He was executed because he murdered 3 people. That is the sole reason he went to the gurney. There is no other reason that he was executed.
Exactly.
And then, of course, you have the problem. The death penalty, the issue with the death penalty overall, in my mind, is 4% of the time, according to a study from years back, we kill the wrong people. So, in other words, you go through the whole trial process and still at the end of it all, 4% of the time, people get executed when they didn't even commit the crime.
This is a misleading study. First off, even if we take all the cases, and I'm being generous, even if we take all the cases of executed inmates post-Furman that were in question, it comes out more around 1 or 2%. And that's being generous.
The last stream we did where we talked about the death penalty, another Kyle Kulinski video, he quoted the same study. The study said 4% of people on death row could possibly be innocent. It didn't say 4% of innocent who were executed were innocent. That people currently on death row. And another thing, again, Kyle's just muddying the waters. Ernest Johnson's guilt was never in any way, shape, or form in any degree of doubt at all. So he's trying to bring up evidence of innocence where there is none.
Yeah, this is a case where the murderer admitted he did it. So, yeah, you're right. Kyle is muddying the waters. This is not a case of innocence. And if you want to make an argument for putting safeguards against executing innocent people,
I'm in favor of that.
I am 100% in favor of that. And I think that the fact that Oklahoma didn't take that bill up for a vote, the one that would have established an innocence commission and would have put a prosecutorial review board, the fact they didn't take that up, that was stupid. They absolutely should do that. No, death penalty proponents don't want innocent people executed. In fact, I think we want them executed less than the antis do.
Well, we don't want them an innocent person executed at all.
Yeah, but I think that
the way that they keep muddying the waters makes it seem like some of these death penalty opponents want an innocent person executed just so they can say, "Ha, we can now argue against the death penalty because we executed someone who was innocent. So we can now justify abolishing it." Because the overwhelming majority of people who are against the death penalty are against it because they're concerned about innocent people being executed. Ernest Johnson is not in any way, shape, or form innocent in any way, shape, or form. Nice try, Kyle. We're not falling for it.
So if you're okay with the death penalty, you're saying, I'm okay with the state murdering people, innocent people, 4% of the time.
Wrong, Kyle. Also, I find it interesting that he says if you're okay with the death penalty, you're okay with them murdering innocent people. But this is also a guy who opposes intervention in pretty much any case. So, okay, Kyle, let me flip this argument and use your own words against you. If you are opposed to military interventions overseas, you are okay with genocide. You are okay with war crimes. Yeah, you're okay with Rwanda. You were perfectly fine with 1 million Tutsis being slaughtered. by
And
their own
specifically
government.
with the death penalty, if you're blanketly against the death penalty, you know what? If a murderer's serving life in prison for murder and they murder another person, you're fine with that. Okay, we can do this right back at you. If you don't want to execute any murderers ever, then every single murderer who is in prison who commits another murder, that is your fault, antis. That is your fault.
Yeah. And
We can do
just
the
put them in
exact same thing.
solitary. Yeah. Oh, just put them in solitary. Yeah, they want to get rid of
guess what?
solitary too.
Yeah. Also, you don't think inmates know how to order murders or commit murders even while in solitary?
Yeah.
You know why we have ADX Florence in the first place? Do you got? If anyone who's against the death penalty is listening, do you know why we have that supermax prison in Colorado, the federal supermax prison? It's because literally lifers serving for murder committed murders in prison. That is literally why ADX Florence exists, and even that's not foolproof. We've learned that in some cases, members of prison gangs, particularly the Aryan Brotherhood, have even ordered murders out of there. In fact, they ordered the murders of 2 black inmates at the U.S. federal penitentiary in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, over 1,500 miles away. Those murders were ordered from ADX Florence.
Yeah.
Those inmates were serving life sentences for murder, and they still ordered them all the entire way across the country.
And ADX is the most secure prison probably in the world. Like, you're in there 23 hours a day in a soundproofed cell, no contact with anyone.
In fact, the way that the is designed, literally inmates can't even see the skyline.
Yeah. It's deliberately designed to make sure inmates don't even know where they are in the prison. And even
still
then,
they do that.
Yeah. So this is something I always ask, like the death penalty opponents, like when it comes to recidivist murderers like Mark Hopkinson, Caboni Savage, Clarence Ray Allen, people like this are able to order murders while in solitary confinement. What's your solution? Where do we draw the line? At what point will you finally be convinced that these people are too dangerous to be kept alive? I never get a satisfactory answer, ever.
See,
They always say,
these people have the morality, if you could even call it that the world is basically like the Batman universe, where if you execute a murderer, you're no better than a murderer. Well, guess that's not how anything works. By that logic, prisons would be bad for incarcerating kidnappers.
Yeah. They live in a
universe where they believe that it's supposed to work like a fucking superhero universe. Guess what? That's not how the world works. It's never worked like that, and it probably won't.
Yeah. And the reason we have the death penalty in the first place is because of people like that.
Because people like Ernest Johnson who commit crimes like murdering through people by slamming a hammer on their heads.
Yeah. And I also want to point people out, if you think the death penalty is barbaric, just think about what you have to do to end up getting it.
You don't get executed for walking. You don't get executed for smoking pot. You don't get executed for drinking. You go to the death chamber for one reason and one reason only, and that's convicted of capital murder. In this case, with Ernest Johnson, it was 3 capital.
Yeah.
So murder is okay sometimes if it's done with a process that found the wrong conclusion.
That's not murder, Kyle.
Kyle looks like he's having a stroke.
Yeah. I didn't notice I paused on that. Okay. Yeah. There should be a proverb. If Kyle Kulinski has a stroke, would anyone even notice or something? Something like that.
He would be smarter.
Yeah. That's not murder is by definition unlawful. Kyle is doing something that a lot of antis do. They conflate homicide with murder. Homicide is not in and of itself a crime. Murder is a type of homicide, and that is a crime. If I shoot and kill someone in self-defense, that's a homicide, but it's not a crime. I
mean, they act like it's such a bait. They're just like, "Ha, got you. The death penalty is homicide, huh?" Yeah.
Yeah.
Shit.
Yeah.
But there's this thing called a justifiable homicide, and the death penalty is a justifiable homicide.
Yeah.
They act like it's such a bait. They're just like, oh yeah, if it's a death certificate of homicide murder. Well, okay, two things. Well, the manner of death is a homicide. Cause of death is typically written as either it was used, which in this case with Johnson was lethal injection, or it's judicial execution.
Yeah. Or my favorite is to say the cause of death will say murder. No, it fucking won't. It won't. Murder is by definition unlawful, and all murders have to be turned over to the county sheriff's office in the state, because that's considered a crime. And execution is not a crime. I have tried to explain this time and time and time and time and time again.
If you follow my account on Twitter, which I'm sure Suzuki, a lot of your followers, who watch these videos also follow me. I want you to often I have to disprove the death penalty's murder argument because I do it at least 3 to 4 times every fucking week.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen it, and
if you took a shot every time I have to fucking explain this shit, there would be no amount of liver transplants available to be able to replace your destroyed liver if you took a shot every time you saw that I had to fucking argue that they were talking shit.
Yeah, and every time you exhaled, the fumes would just kill everybody within a 1,000-mile radius, of alcohol poisoning. So yeah, they seem incapable of understanding the difference between homicide and murder, and I'm on the verge of just giving up trying to explain it. But yeah,
I'm not okay with that, and I hope you're not okay with that either. So, and I've often said, are there instances where I see a heinous crime and I think the person does have full mental capabilities and I don't feel bad for them if they get found guilty and sentenced to death? Yeah, and maybe that makes me a bad leftist or whatever. But this is not one.
No, Kyle, that's probably one of the very few redeeming characteristics that you have, and even then you shut it out. So I can't really even give you credit for that.
Yeah, it's like you take 1 step forward and then 50 steps backwards.
Yeah. It's like, at least you didn't take 50 backwards, but you took 49 backwards. So, I can't give you much credit.
One of those instances. This is one where if you believe in the Constitution and you believe in the 8th Amendment protection from cruel and unusual punishment, I think this is an open and shut case. You could have all the sympathy in the world for the victims of the crime, without a doubt. But you still would have to say life in prison or life in some sort of facility.
Mark Hopkinson has entered the chat.
Yeah. If SCOTUS, the Supreme Court, had found that there was a legitimate reason to believe that Ernest Johnson met the criteria established by Atkins, they would have stated, again, not only did they not do that, not a single justice, even the most liberal ones, even a death penalty opponent, Stephen Breyer, did not in any way, shape, or form dissent from the opinion denying the stay of execution for Ernest Johnson. And I know what I'm going to say is going to be very controversial, but states should do whatever they can to loophole Atkins as much as possible, because I don't want there to be any reason why someone like Ernest Johnson, who commits multiple murders, to avoid the death penalty at all. So for states, they need to do whatever they can to find a loophole. I don't care how petty it is. I don't care how stupid the loophole is. Fucking find one.
Yeah. And not only that, Kyle is saying that the death penalty is incompatible with the Constitution. Let's take a look at the Constitution. The 14th Amendment states, no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of the citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law.
Well, specifically, I think the Fifth Amendment's a better place for this. Okay. Fifth Amendment states no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime. So the founders of the Constitution specifically put in capital because they always assumed to some degree that there would still be the death penalty.
Yeah. But I also think, without due process of law, that indicates that you can be deprived of life, liberty, or property with due process of law.
And Ernest Johnson got
27 years.
Quarter century of that. He got over a quarter century of due process of law.
Yeah. and he exhausted every avenue of appeal. It's not like we execute people in the middle of their appeals. We don't do that.
It's not like we take them out back immediately after trial and then put two. We don't fucking do that.
Yeah.
That can help with his mental disability. But
I'm sorry, Kyle. I don't think he does. Even if you could rehabilitate somebody like that, I'm sorry, he doesn't deserve it. There are so many other people who deserve rehabilitation, whose future we should invest in. Murderers are not one of them.
Especially cases where people have committed multiple murders.
Yes. If you
He
commit
could be
multiple...
most rehabilitatable person in the world, still deserve to be executed just the same.
Yeah. I know.
Once you commit multiple murders, I don't care how sorry you are. I don't care how much you regret what you've done. I don't care how much you promise you won't do it again. You deserve those 5 grams of pentobarbital just the fucking same.
Yeah. And like there are lots of people who are worth rehabilitating. I don't agree with like imprisoning low-level drug traffickers for life. I think those people do deserve rehabilitation. But
I would rather spend more time and effort to rehabilitate someone who was arrested for pot, even if they kept doing it over and over again, than to rehabilitate someone like Ernest Johnson and have reoffend once.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I've said this before, I'll say it again. If you commit first-degree murder, you deserve one of 2 sentences, either life in prison without parole or death. There are no exceptions. And that means I don't care if you get rehabilitated. I don't care if you're sorry. Because the crime you've committed is one that cannot be reversed.
And cannot be forgiven.
Yeah, and can't be forgiven. And if you commit a crime like that, you should not ever be in society again. If that means either by keeping in prison for life or through execution. And in this case, yeah, it warranted execution. So no, I don't want rehabilitation for these people. There are so many other cases where you can apply it. This is not one of them.
The thing is, like, beyond that, he also did, according to all the reports, he's shown complete remorse through all the time.
Cool. If he was so remorseful, he should have absolutely dropped his appeals, put his money where his mouth is, and then just accept being executed. And that's the one thing he didn't do.
Yeah. Yeah, like you said, if he was really sorry about it, he would have accepted his punishment. And there are some inmates like I respect people like Michael.
I wouldn't say respect. I wouldn't say respect.
Yeah, not respect. What's the word? I guess I have more respect for, maybe. I would have a lot more I have a lot more respect for the inmates who just acknowledge what they did deserves a death penalty and drop their appeals and accept their punishment like a man. Like David Mason, the guy in California.
Yeah.
He acknowledged it.
Who basically insisted. Well, Daniel Lopez, I think, is a better example. Daniel Lopez was executed in Texas in 2015 for running over a police officer. He stated emphatically that he died because he wanted to give the victims' families some level of justice and relief, and he fought off to stay his execution. And he apologized in his last statement. Ernest Johnson did not do that. He didn't even have to apologize verbally, because when he was on the gurney, he was executed. When they asked him if he had any last words, he just said he didn't say anything. This was a written statement, the one that Kyle written statement. He never said those words in actuality. He just wrote them down.
Yeah. And I do think he was genuinely remorseful, but at the same time, I don't think that it should have affected his punishment at all. Our justice system doesn't work that way.
He was remorseful. You know, you should feel 3 fucking people by slamming a hammer on their heads.
Yeah.
And you should be sorry for punishment.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't give a shit if he's remorseful. He still, it doesn't change the fact he's a murderer. It doesn't change the fact that the death penalty is the only appropriate sentence in this case.
Oh, if the idea is rehabilitation from crimes, mission accomplished. The guy's rehabilitated. He feels
Wrong, Kyle. You get back to me when his 3 victims are alive again, and then we can talk about rehabilitation.
And I know some death penalty opponents love to say, well, this doesn't bring the victims back. Well, yeah, no shit. That's not the point of the death penalty. We've never, even the dumbest death penalty supporter has never said the point of the death penalty is to bring back the victims. No amount of punishment or rehabilitation would have ever brought back Mary Bratcher, Fred Jones, or Mabel Scruggs. They are just as dead forever as they were back when they were murdered. And no amount of punishment, no amount of rehabilitation would have changed that. That's not why we had the death penalty. We don't have the death penalty to bring back any victims. And even if we did, the death penalty opponents would still be fervently against that.
Yeah.
100% they would be.
Yeah.
The point of the death penalty, as you said, was to enforce a system of consequences.
Yeah. And so, I find that argument one of the silliest. Just the, it doesn't bring the victim back. Oh, really? Here I was thinking I could revive the dead through necromantic ceremonies, in the execution chamber. I thought, if I had like a satanic priest over the gurney, muttering incantations as his inmate was executed, I could channel that inmate's life energy into the cemetery and raise the victims. But no, now you're telling me the death penalty doesn't bring the victims back? I mean, wow, you should you should go to the UN over that, Yeah.
feels terrible for what he did. He knows it was wrong.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah, some people
he knows it was wrong, but he didn't.
You just said he didn't. Yep, Kyle had another slip there. Kyle, you're supposed to be claiming that he doesn't know that it was wrong. You just undercut everything you said before.
If you're going to say stupid shit that's just wrong, at least be consistent in your stupid shit. Don't, just fucking U-turn on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're going to lie, at least keep your lies consistent.
Yeah.
Fake that, and it's like, okay, well, what do you do in that situation? These are all complex things. But what's not complex is this punishment doesn't really fit the crime, given all the facts of the situation.
Let's see. He took 3 lives. He lost his own life. That seems to fit the crime pretty well. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Who knows?
Okay.
Could be my white privilege talking.
Did any of his victims in any way, shape, or form threaten him or put Ernest Johnson in a situation where he believed he had to kill them in order to not be killed himself? No. Did anyone force him to murder 3 people? Also, no. Was there any question that he did this? Once again, no. The punishment fits the goddamn crime.
Yeah.
End of story.
Yeah, precisely.
And given our Constitution and the 8th Amendment. So, executing a mentally disabled, effectively, person, that's not okay, man. And we are one of the few remaining countries that does the death penalty. Not just few remaining developed countries, few remaining countries that still does the death penalty.
Ooh, I love this argument. Yeah, Japan, South Korea, Singapore, Taiwan,
India.
Yeah, and India could not be reached for comment. This is one of the funniest arguments. Again, it's just like they say, the death penalty is racist and death penalty is racist. That's why only third world savage barbaric shithole countries still have it. It's more and also I think the fact that I think it's a good thing that the United States still has it. Just because the majority of countries don't doesn't mean it's the right thing. This is a fallacy. This is the fallacy of it's kind of a variant on the fallacy of popularity. Something being popular doesn't necessarily mean it's right. Even if no countries had the death penalty, it would still be a proper punishment for a crime like this.
Yeah, I had the death penalty to be like Norway, where they gave a 77-time murderer 21 years in prison at minimum. Fucking PlayStation.
Yeah, and he
3
won
fucking
that
prison cells, a fucking television, video games. counseling, therapy, being able to take college courses. That's not justice. That's just ass.
Yeah, that is, and anyone who aspires to make the justice system like Norway's has no place in government. And I will vociferously campaign against anyone who wants to aspire
The
to Norway's
people with that mindset, if you could even call it a mindset, I wouldn't even fucking trust them to run a Chuck E. Cheese's restaurant.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it is heartbreaking. Oh, final point is, this one really gets me. So the stay of execution wasn't granted, even though the Pope said granted, Congress people said granted, a former governor said.
Funny. I thought your show was called Secular Talk, Kyle. Why are you bringing up the Pope? Also, the Pope is opposed to abortion. Are you now going to be anti-abortion?
I love
also, and one other thing.
I love the penalty opponents when they try when it comes to religion. First of all, a lot of them are pro-choice. I don't have a problem with being pro-choice. I am as well pro-choice, which also upsets death penalty opponents because they can't do the life because that doesn't work on me.
Yeah.
But the people who are, they like to say, oh, these governors want to ban abortion because of religious beliefs, but when they deny a stay of execution or don't grant clemency, but I thought you were Christian, aren't you Catholic? Shouldn't you listen to Francis? Like they only want secularity when it's in their ends. And personally, yeah, I don't really care what Pope Francis or any religion says.
Yeah.
Anyone who is in government has, first and foremost, to the U.S. Constitution, not the Vatican or not what their religion says. If you want to put your religion over the laws of this country, become a priest, move to one of those countries that's a theocracy. Mm-hmm. The U.S. ain't it. Never been it to do this.
And also, the same week that Ernst Johnson was executed, a story broke that over 320,000 young boys were molested, and by Catholic priests, and the church knew about it and covered it up. Know your place, Pope. Know your fucking place.
Another thing, the Congress people, Cori Bush and Ayanna Pressley, and your state has the misfortune to have that dumb bitch live there, represent you guys. I'm very sorry.
I apologize for electing that rotten egg.
Let me just say, Johnson had more brain cells than any of these death opponents combined who are trying to sympathize with him and try to get his sentence commuted. Ernest Johnson, the least intellectually disabled of those who are trying to save Ernest Johnson's life.
Yeah. And again, I should apologize for on behalf of my state for Ayanna Pressley. She was once on the Boston Council.
As you said, that she has less of an understanding of justice than she has hair, and that's fucking true.
Yeah.
Granted. So he said, for the love of God, please, could I have the firing squad instead of lethal injection? The response was a swift no.
Because it's not allowed under Missouri law, and because they don't have a chamber or a protocol equipped to use it.
And also because he didn't meet the burden of justifying a different method of execution.
Yeah. And frankly, I don't think any state should use firing squad anymore.
Yeah.
It's just don't. You have methods that work. Why make it more complicated? Oops, wrong button. There we go.
So he had succumbed to his, hey, this is my fate. This is what's going to happen. Can you at least do something that I won't feel probably any pain at all? If you're in front of the firing squad, I mean, one bullet to the brain and you're donezo. You're out of there, and there's probably...
Okay, few things. The firing squad are taught to aim for center mass, not the head. And two, pentobarbital, Ernst Johnson died in 9 minutes. And he was unconscious long before that. So it was not inhumane. In
You know
fact,
what's
this,
funny is that the death penalty opponents were saying that he was going to suffer a lot of pain because of his brain condition, that pentobarbital could cause seizures. Number one, pentobarbital literally treats seizures. Number
Yeah.
two, none of the witnesses said that he had any indications of pain and suffering.
Yeah, but we'll never know if he really suffered. Yeah, I'm willing to bet he didn't. And if he did, it was not for
It
long.
pales, even if he did, and even if it was for long. I think most people would rather take pentobarbital, even if it hurts, than to have a hammer slammed on their heads over and over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, his death was literally planned out to be as painless as possible. The same cannot be said for the 3 people he bludgeoned to death.
And not only that, but most people, when they die, will experience pain that lasts longer and is more severe than what Ernest Johnson got.
Yeah.
He got the luxury of knowing when, how, and why he would die.
Yeah.
None of these 3 victims knew when. None of these 3 victims had a choice in how they died. And the only reason these victims died was because they were in the way of Ernest Johnson getting money to buy drugs.
Yeah. And, well, he did get his drugs, just not the ones he wanted.
Yeah.
No pain. They said, no, we're going to do lethal injection. Now, there are reports that he had labored breathing for a little bit before he finally died.
Wow, that's a side effect.
You know that people breathe.
Yeah. People breathe when they're not dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, is he really trying to make it out to be a botch? Yeah, labored breathing doesn't necessarily indicate pain. It indicates, he's dying. That's how death works. You stop breathing, and the body will try to fight the effects of the drug until it can't. Also, this is just this is also a side effect. Even when you're not executing somebody,
even if you're using the symptoms of these drugs change don't become aggressive just because they're being used for executions. If they were, then they wouldn't be using pentobarbital, period.
Yeah.
And this is the problem with the lethal injection, is it's set up to make us feel better about what we're doing because it seems like medical and serious. But a lot of evidence suggests that, especially with the new lethal injection cocktails, there's been a lot of horror stories. People not dying for 30 minutes, people foaming at the mouth, people seizing.
Okay. First of all, pentobarbital has been used by Missouri almost 8 years, and they've not changed the amount of drug that they use or the way they do the drugs. They've used the pentobarbital ever since they executed Joseph Paul Franklin. I think it was in November of 2013. The average time it takes for an inmate to die on protocol is under 10 minutes. Ernest Johnson died in 9. The average is about 8 to 9 minutes.
Yeah.
And not a single one of them had signs of them being in any pain.
Yeah.
In any way,
Zero botches. Zero botches. And also Kyle had almost another thing of self-awareness. He said, because of especially these new cocktails. Yeah, gee, I wonder why they have to try all these new lethal injection cocktails. It's almost like people like you have been harassing pharmaceutical companies not to sell their drugs to prisons that carry out executions. So if I would actually blame any botched executions on people like him.
Yeah. And Justice Scalia said this in a Supreme Court case. He said the reason why states can't get the 100% effective drugs like sodium thiopental, which they used beforehand, is because death penalty have been making it difficult, if not impossible, to get said 100%.
Yeah.
So in other words, people feeling extreme torture and pain before they die. Citation
needed, Kyle. And no, the gray zone does not count.
And again, he had labor breathing before he died.
Most people breathe before they die. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. I mean, wait, really? People breathe before they die? and let's alert the presses. I mean, you might have a Nobel Prize in the mail for this amazing discovery.
On the way out, for good measure, it wasn't just, we're going to kill you. We're going to torture you too. Good riddance.
Yeah, that was
Okay.
Yeah, I can just imagine.
First of all,
Governor
there's no
Person-
indication, no indication that Ernest Johnson, in any way, shape, or form, suffered pain. But also, yeah, good riddance to Ernest Johnson. May he
good
rest in
riddance to him.
pentobarbital.
Yeah.
May he rest in pentobarbital.
Yeah, R.I.P. Rest in pentobarbital. Also, no, this lethal injection was specifically designed to not torture somebody to death because people thought the electric chair was inhumane. So no, this was made with the opposite intent. But Kyle makes it seem like the governor was sitting in the witness room masturbating as he saw the inmate being executed. Like, Jesus Christ, where does he come up with this shit? Really? It's not unique to him, actually, but like, the death penalty opponents make it out like we're bloodthirsty and, just want to see people die. That's not the case. There's only one reason these people are like I said before, there's only one reason these people are on death row. And the process is designed to make it as humane as possible for the inmate.
You always want to try to avoid. You don't want to become the demon that you're trying to avoid. You don't want to become the evil.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Yeah.
Yes. The same Batman thing. Murder through people with a hammer is just the same as the person who murdered those two people with a hammer.
Yeah. Again, progressives want to. Progressives want to get rid of.
About these people is that they're progressively diluting the morality of our country. They're progressively reducing the amount of justice, and above all, they're progressively delusional. That's the most progressive thing. Kulinski, people like Cori Bush, people like Ayanna Pressley, they're progressively full.
Yeah, and they progressively make me want to deep throat a Mossberg.
Actor that you're trying to prevent, and oftentimes people do that. In order to prevent these terrible things, I will do the terrible things. That's not smart, and that's not just. That's actually really, really stupid.
And Kyle knows a lot about really, really stupid. No, Kyle, this is justice. This is like we've said before countless times. This is the enforcement of consequences. And in fact, I think it's stupid to try and equate murder with executions, because it shows a fundamental misunderstanding on Kyle's part about the justice system as a whole, about guilty versus innocent, and about right and even right versus wrong. So, yeah.
This is a classic example of that right here, and it's heartbreaking.
Okay, that's the end of the video. I apologize for dragging you through that. I hope your liver has survived the 1 hour and 13 minutes that we spent watching this thing.
I'm doing all right.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm pretty sure I lost some brain cells listening to that video. I mean, you do adapt to the pain, but
I assumed that interacting with antis that it would just get easier. No, they managed to go through rock bottom every fucking time. You might think they're being about as stupid as they can get. Well, guess what? They'll go 10 times deeper and on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
I have more respect for flat earthers than people who blanketly oppose the death penalty. I take flat earthers more seriously than people who blanketly oppose the death penalty.
Yeah. These people live in an alternate reality. I mean, a reality where the difference, where right and wrong, the line between right and wrong.
There is no difference. There is no line at this point. The most intellectually disabled inmate on death row is a Nobel Prize winner compared to any of these fucking antis like Kyle Kulinski.
Yeah. And, I used to have a lot of respect for Kyle. He used to actually not talk about the death penalty that much, but ever since he ever since, I don't know, about 2017, he's just been going off the rails, and he never fails to astonish me with just how many bottoms of barrels he can scrape.
Yeah.
So yeah. So yeah, if you want to make a closing statement,
I think I'm good.
Yeah. All right. So thank you for
Ernest
everyone.
Johnson got exactly what he deserved.
Yep.
Fucking seed.
Yep. You got what you deserved. And
if you have any problems with Ernest Johnson being executed, kindly roll it, kindly write it down on a piece of paper, kindly roll it and shove it.
Mm-hmm.
I rest my case.
Yep. All right. So thank you for coming on, Death Watch. Thank you for everyone who tuned in. We don't have any viewers now, but I saw some earlier. And good night. I think we'll do another stream sometime in the future. And there's no shortage of videos to do a stream on. So, yep. Have a good night.